An attorney for D.C. police said in court for the first time the department did use tear gas on protesters around Lafayette Park last June. Protesters and the ACLU are suing federal police and MPD over their use of tear gas. WUSA 9 investigative reporter Nathan Baca was out there when all this happened to explain what was revealed in court today. Hey, Nathan, this is something that we've known for some time, but it's really the first time that police are confirming it.
Well, MPD has consistently said that it was not involved in what happened at Lafayette Park June 1st when protesters were cleared just minutes before President Trump walked across the street towards St. John's Episcopal Church. But in federal court today, MPD's attorney did talk about how that department did use tear gas in the area.
WUSA 9 collected evidence and showed video that proved federal police agencies fired tear gas canisters at protesters at and around Lafayette Park June 1st, 2020. Protesters also reported seeing D.C. Metropolitan Police firing tear gas at their direction closer to 17th and H while fleeing federal police tear gas. The department has previously refused to say what, if any, tear gas munitions it used on protesters that day. But in a federal court hearing Friday, MPD's attorney gave the following reasons for why the department used tear gas and other chemical irritants on protesters June 1st. The curfew, violence of past nights, chaos created by federal defendants, discharge of tear gas in that direction was not unreasonable. MPD's attorney added that because its officers did not target specific protesters, their constitutional rights were not violated.
They suggested at various points that they were encouraging people to move south on 17th Street. That's encouraging via tear gas.
Scott Michelman with DC's ACLU is the lead attorney for the protesters.
That day was scarring in multiple ways, just in terms of the unexpected nature of the attack, the brutality of it, and the betrayal that many of them felt.
Press, let's go. Come on, guys, we gotta go.
Justice Department attorneys defending former Trump administration officials and federal police commanders defended their actions in June with two primary arguments. First, it needed to protect the president from an unscreened crowd before he made his sudden walk across Lafayette Park to the church. Secondly, because there is a new administration, the protesters who are suing can't claim their ability to protest in the future is at risk.
Now, a federal judge will decide whether or not the police agencies and federal officials get to keep their so-called qualified immunity, which protects them against civil lawsuits. Reporting live, Nathan Baca, WUSA 9.